Poor Waitress gave food an old woman every day. One morning, a luxury SUV arrived at her door. Tails, the woman by the steps. The first time Zuri Okafor noticed the old woman, it was a Tuesday in late October, and the wind coming off Peachtree Street smelled like rain and exhaust, and something else, something sharp like cold concrete that had never been warm. Zuri was hauling 2 garbage bags from the kitchen to the side alley behind Maple and Grits Diner when she saw her. The woman was sitting on the bottom step of the service entrance, her back straight, despite everything. Despite the thin brown dress she wore, patterned with faded flowers that had given up their color years ago, despite the fraying headscarf she had knotted tightly beneath her chin, despite the fact that it was 43 degrees and she had no coat. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, like she was waiting for church to begin, like sitting on cold concrete steps in the back alley of a diner in the old Fourth Ward neighborhood of Atlanta was a perfectly dignified thing to do. Zuri almost said nothing. She was already 20 minutes behind. The Tuesday morning rush hit harder than expected after the Braves playoff coverage ran long on TV, and half of downtown apparently decided to walk in at 7:45 a.m. wanting eggs and opinions. Her section had been a controlled disaster since 6, and Otterline, the manager, had already given her one look over the coffee station that communicated approximately 11 different warnings without a single word. But she stopped. She stopped because the woman's hands, though folded neatly, were trembling, not from cold or not only from cold. They trembled the way hands tremble when they have been still for too long, and the body beneath them has been running on too little. "Ma'am," Zuri said. The woman looked up. Her eyes were the color of dark honey, and they were entirely calm. Not the calm of someone who felt safe, but the calm of someone who had decided long ago that panic was a luxury she could not afford. "Good morning," the woman said. Her voice was low and precise, each word placed carefully, like she was setting good china on a table. Zuri set down the garbage bags. "Are you all right?" "I am quite well, thank you." Zuri looked at her for a long moment. "Have you eaten?" The woman said nothing. That nothing was the loudest answer Zuri had ever heard. She brought her a plate from the kitchen, eggs scrambled soft the way the cooks did them before the breakfast rush when nobody was watching the portion sizes, a biscuit with real butter, a cup of grits with cheddar melted into the top, and a large coffee with 2 sugars. She paid for it herself. $4.75 out of the 12 she had in her apron pocket, which was everything she had until Friday's paycheck cleared. She didn't think about it very hard. She just did it. The woman, she said her name was Celestine. Just Celestine, like a single name was all she had decided to give, ate slowly and with tremendous dignity. She didn't rush. She didn't hunch over the plate. She sat on that cold step and ate like she was at a table with a cloth on it, and when she finished, she folded the paper napkin into a small square and set it on the empty plate and said, "That was a very good biscuit." "Dottie makes them from scratch," Zuri said. "She comes in at 4:30 in the morning just for the biscuits." "Someone who wakes up at 4:30 to make biscuits for other people," Celestine said, "is someone who understands what it means to care." Zuri smiled. She had to get back inside. She picked up the plate, and when she turned to go, Celestine said, "What is your name?" "Zuri." Celestine repeated it softly, like she was trying the sound of it. "Zuri," she said. "That is a beautiful name." "It means beautiful in Swahili," Zuri said. "My mum's idea. She thought it would give me something to live up to." Something passed across Celestine's face, a flicker so fast Zuri almost missed it. Something that looked for just 1 second like grief. "Your mother sounds wise," Celestine said. Zuri went back inside. She didn't expect to see Celestine again. Atlanta was a city full of people passing through, and the old Fourth Ward had enough foot traffic that a stranger on the steps was just weather, notable for a moment, then gone. She told herself she'd done a good thing and let it be a one-time good thing. But Wednesday morning, when Zuri came in for the 6 a.m., open Celestine was there. Same step, same folded hands, same quiet dignity, like the concrete beneath her was perfectly fine, like the cold creeping up through her thin-soled shoes was not happening at all. Zuri bought her another plate. Scrambled eggs again, but this time she added bacon and a second biscuit. $6.50. She still didn't think about it very hard. Thursday, Celestine was there again. By Friday, Zuri had stopped being surprised. By the following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the first morning, it had become a ritual. Zuri arrived. Celestine was on the step. Zuri brought food. They talked for 6 or 8 minutes while Celestine ate, and then Zuri went back to her section, and the day folded over it like it was nothing. Like a small act of kindness was just the ordinary texture of a morning. Except Zuri was spending between $5 and $8 of her own money every day on a woman she barely knew, which on a waitress's income in Atlanta, where rent had gone completely feral, and her studio in East Lake already ate 60% of her take-home, was not nothing. It was, in fact, a choice she was making with the kind of money she didn't technically have. She didn't tell anyone. Not Otterline, who would have found some regulation about feeding people on the service entrance steps. Not her co-worker Bex, who was kind but had the tendency to turn quiet acts into loud stories. Not her roommate Tamika, who would have told her she was being irresponsible, which was probably true. She just kept doing it. In those morning conversations, Zuri learned things about Celestine in pieces. The way you learn about a photograph by looking at it section by section. She learned that Celestine had grown up in Savannah, that she had once owned a house with a garden where she grew collard greens and 4 kinds of tomatoes, that she had a son, one son, whose name she never said directly, but whom she referenced in the careful, sideways manner of someone navigating around something sharp. My son would have liked this kind of morning. My son was never an early riser, always past tense, always at an angle. Zuri did not push. She understood, in the way that children of loss understand, that some things people tell you by not telling you. She also learned that Celestine was sharp, extraordinarily sharp, sharp in the way that old trees are, not quick and bright like something young, but dense and deep and absolutely immovable. She made observations about the customers Zuri described from her section that were so precise they startled her. She asked questions about the diner's finances. How many covers do you do on a Tuesday compared to a Friday? That made Zuri realize she was talking to someone who had, at some point in her life, known a great deal about how businesses ran. Where did you work? Zuri asked one morning, 3 weeks in. Many places, Celestine said. What kind of work? Celestine looked at her over the rim of the coffee cup. The kind where you build things, she said. And then sometimes you watch them fall. She didn't say more, and Zuri didn't ask. On a Thursday morning in mid-November, 3.5 weeks after Zuri had first brought her eggs on a cold October step, something changed. Zuri came out the service door at 6:08 a.m. With the usual plate, grits and eggs and a biscuit, the large coffee with 2 sugars, and found Celestine not sitting upright on the step, but leaning heavily against the brick wall beside it, her eyes half closed, her breath coming in short, uneven pulls. Celestine! Zuri set the food down fast and crouched beside her. Hey, look at me. Celestine's eyes opened slowly. They were glassy in a way they had never been before. I am fine, she said, but her voice had lost its careful precision. The words came out soft and unsteady, like she was speaking through gauze. You're not fine. Zuri put her hand on Celestine's forehead. She was cold and clammy in the particular way that frightened people. I'm calling an ambulance. No. The word came out firmer than Zuri expected. No ambulance. Celestine, no. She gripped Zuri's wrist with surprising strength. Her honey-colored eyes focused briefly with something urgent in them. "There is someone," she said, "someone who needs to know, but not an ambulance." "Who? Who do I call?" Celestine's hand on her wrist tightened one more degree, and then she said a name. One name, just one, pressed out like it cost her something significant. Before her eyes closed entirely, and her body went soft and heavy, and she slumped sideways into Zuri's arms. The name, she said, was Dorian. And Zuri, holding a woman she had known for less than a month and fed with money she couldn't spare, found herself kneeling on a cold Atlanta concrete step with her arms full of someone else's emergency, absolutely certain that nothing about this morning was going to end the way she had expected. She called 911. She held Celestine's hand until the sirens came. The black SUV. The ambulance took Celestine at 6:27 a.m. Zuri watched it disappear around the corner onto Edgewood Avenue and stood there, for 30 seconds doing nothing. The cold had settled into her uniform, and the service step was just a step again, empty, like nothing had ever happened on it. She went back inside and worked her section like nothing was wrong, because nothing, technically, was wrong. But she kept thinking about the name, Dorian, the way Celestine had said it, not like calling for help, but like issuing a warning, like a name she'd avoided saying for a long time and had finally, under extreme duress, allowed out. She had no last name, no number, no address. Nothing for a woman she'd fed for 26 straight days except savannah, collard greens, a garden with 4 kinds of tomatoes, and a son who had never been an early riser. By noon, she'd checked her phone 4 times without knowing what she expected to find. Otterline caught her at the coffee station at 12:45 during the post-lunch lull. Otterline Marsh had been managing Maple and Grits for 11 years and had a talent for noticing things she had not been told. "You're distracted," Otterline said. "Not an accusation, just information." "The lady on the steps," Zuri said before Otterline could ask. "She collapsed this morning. I called 911. Otterline wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "Bex told me about a month ago. I didn't say anything because it was your business and it was kind." A pause. "Grady Memorial. It's the closest. Go check after your shift. You can say you're family. Nobody's going to look too hard if you walk in confident." "That's technically kind," Otterline said firmly. "It's technically kind." And she walked back toward the kitchen. Zuri's shift ended at 3. She was pulling on her coat in the back, calculating the bus route to Grady Memorial. When she heard it before she saw it, a sound that didn't belong on this particular block of the old 4th Ward at 3:15 on a Thursday afternoon. A sound that was too smooth, too quiet, too substantial for this street, like a room moving through the air at 40 miles an hour. She stepped out the back door and looked toward the alley entrance and saw the SUV. It was black, not dark grey or very dark navy, but black in the way of things built to communicate an absence of compromise. A Cadillac Escalade, long wheelbase, with tinted windows that absorbed the November light. It pulled to a slow stop at the alley entrance with the confidence of a vehicle that had never once had to look for parking. The driver, a man in a dark uniform jacket, stepped out and opened the rear door. And then Dorian Ashwell stepped onto the pavement of her alley. Zuri's first thought was that he was taller than she'd imagined. She had imagined someone from Celestine's sideways references. My son was never an early riser, and had assembled a vague picture from those fragments. A man, probably middle-aged, probably tired in the particular way of sons who had been failing someone's expectations for a long time. A man with soft edges and guilty eyes. Dorian Ashwell had no soft edges. He was 38 or so, well over 6 feet, built with the kind of physical certainty that comes from a life where everything that needs to happen gets made to happen. He wore a charcoal wool suit that had not come off any rack, and his face was the color of dark cedar and arranged in an expression of absolute, controlled fury. The kind of fury that has been compressed so many times over so many years that it no longer even looks like fury anymore, just looks like the face of a man who has decided something. He crossed the alley toward her with long, deliberate steps. "You work here," he said, not a question. "I do," Zuri said. "You're the one who called the ambulance." She straightened her spine. "I am." He stopped 2 feet from her. Up close, she could see that his eyes were his mother's eyes, that same dark honey color, but where Celestine's eyes were calm, his were something else entirely. They were the eyes of a man standing very close to the edge of something he had been trying not to fall into for a long time. "How long have you been feeding her?" he said. "Almost a month." Something moved through his jaw, a tightening. "And what exactly were you hoping to get out of that?" The audacity of the question hit Zuri like cold water. "Excuse me?" "A woman appears on your back step. You don't know her. You start buying her food every day. For a month." He let that land. "I'm asking what you expected in return." Zuri stared at him. Then she laughed. Not the nice laugh, not the customer-facing laugh, but the short, flat laugh that came out when something was so absurd that politeness couldn't hold. "I expected her to not go hungry," she said. "That's the whole thing, that's all of it. People don't do things for nothing." "I'm going to need you to take several steps back," Zuri said, "and reconsider the tone you're using with me." He did not take several steps back. He took 1 step forward. "You called 911. You didn't call me. She said your name before she passed out. That was all I had. No last name, no number, no address. I called the only people who could actually help her. She has a cell phone. She never showed it to me, or if she had one, she didn't." Zuri stopped. She looked at him very directly. "You knew she was out there." The word landed cleanly. No drama, no accusation in the voice, just the sentence, bare and exact. Dorian Ashwell said nothing. "You knew your mother was sitting on a concrete step behind a diner in November," Zuri said. "And you knew, and you didn't. You don't know anything about my family," he said. His voice came out rougher than he'd intended. She could hear it, the fracture at the edge. "I know she talks about you like you're something she lost," Zuri said. "I know she says your name like it cost something. I know she's been sitting on that step in the cold for a month, and the only person who brought her food was a waitress who couldn't technically afford to." She pulled her bag strap up on her shoulder. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go make sure she's all right." She moved to step around him. His hand came out and caught her arm, not roughly, not violently, just a grip, a reflex, like he hadn't decided to do it until it was already done. She stopped. He stopped. They were close enough that she could see the actual conflict in his eyes, the anger and the guilt and something underneath both of those things that had no clean name. "Wait," he said. She didn't pull away. She didn't move toward him either. She just looked at him with the full force of 24 years of watching people decide whether they were going to be who they should be. "She's at Grady," he said. "Most likely." His hand dropped from her arm. He looked away, jaw still tight, something working through him that she was not going to be allowed to see fully. "My car can take you," he said. "I'll take the bus. It's 40 minutes by bus, 12 by car." Zuri looked at the Escalade. She looked at Dorian Ashwell, this tall, furious, guilty man, standing in her alley with his mother's eyes. She thought about Celestine on that hospital bed, alone, with no one having come yet. "Fine," she said. She walked to the car. He walked beside her. The driver opened the rear door, and she climbed in without saying thank you, because she was not going to perform gratitude right now, and Dorian Ashwell climbed in on the other side, and the Escalade pulled out of the alley into the grey Atlanta afternoon. They rode in silence for 45 seconds. Then Dorian said, without looking at her, "Her name is Celestine Beaumont." Zuri said nothing. "She's my mother," he said. "I know," Zuri said. Another silence. Longer. "She left the house 6 weeks ago," he said. "We had a disagreement. I thought she was staying with her friend Lavinia in Buckhead." A pause. "I didn't know." Zuri looked out the window at Atlanta sliding past. "And if you had known?" He didn't answer. She turned to look at him then. This man who could buy anything in this city, sitting in $200,000 worth of car, not answering the most important question she'd asked him. And even in the anger, even in the judgment she was absolutely entitled to, she noticed his hands in his lap, pressed flat against his thighs the way you press them flat when you need to hold yourself together from the outside because you're not sure you can do it from the inside. She looked back at the window. "Your mother," she said quietly, "makes very good conversation." Dorian Ashwell made a sound that was not quite a laugh. It was something sadder and more complicated than a laugh. It was the sound of a man hearing something about a person he had failed to know well enough. He didn't say anything else. The hospital appeared through the windshield, and they went in. Hired and humiliated. Grady Memorial at 4 in the afternoon was fluorescent and relentless, full of the exhaustion of people waiting too long for news that hadn't come. Zuri and Dorian walked through the main entrance side by side, and not together. She felt the distinction in the way he moved, always a half step ahead, like proximity to another person required deliberate permission. At the intake desk, Dorian said his mother's name and something in the room realigned, quietly, efficiently. A nurse appeared. A doctor was called. He was guided toward a private consultation area with the practiced deference of a hospital that recognized which families had wings named after them. Zuri stayed in the waiting area. She told herself she could leave. She had done what she came to do, but she stayed. 40 minutes later, Dorian came back. He'd rolled his left sleeve to the elbow, the first imprecise thing she'd seen him do. "Severe dehydration," he said. "Borderline hypothermia. They want to keep her overnight." "She'll be all right?" "The doctor says yes." A pause. "She's asking for you." Celestine looked smaller in the hospital bed than she had on the diner steps, which Zuri hadn't thought was possible. She had a heated blanket pulled to her chin and an IV in the back of her left hand, and her headscarf had been replaced by the indignity of a paper hospital gown. But her eyes, when she opened them, were exactly the same. Dark honey, entirely calm, the calm of someone who had decided long ago that panic was a luxury. "You stayed," Celestine said. "For a while," Zuri said. "Sit down." Zuri pulled the chair close to the bed and sat. Dorian stood in the doorway. She was aware of him there the way you are aware of a weather system, present, atmospheric, not yet speaking. Celestine looked at her son for a long moment. Something passed between them that Zuri couldn't fully read. Not forgiveness exactly, not accusation either, but something with both of those things in it, compressed into the silence of two people who had been failing to talk to each other for long enough that the failing had become its own language. "Leave us a moment," Celestine said. Dorian's jaw tightened. He left. Celestine turned back to Zuri. She reached out and put her hand over Zuri's hand on the bed rail, her grip still surprisingly firm for a woman who had nearly passed out from cold and hunger 6 hours ago. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you the truth," Celestine said, "which is different." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "My name is Celestine Beaumont. My son's name is Dorian Beaumont Ashwell. His father took a different name, a business name. Dorian kept both." A pause. "My husband, Regis, built a company here in Atlanta, real estate and development beginning in 1981. He and I built it together, though his name was the one on the door." She said this without bitterness, just as information. Regis died 11 years ago. The company passed to Dorian. Zuri waited. We disagreed, Celestine said carefully, about the direction of certain things, about what the company owed to the communities it operated in, about what family means when it becomes complicated by money. Her hand tightened slightly on Zuri's. I left 6 weeks ago because I needed Dorian to understand something he was not going to understand while I was in that house being managed and accommodated and kept comfortable. I needed him to notice the absence. You were making a point, Zuri said. I was making a point, Celestine confirmed. I did not intend for it to get quite so cold. Something between a laugh and a sigh moved through Zuri. You could have told me I would have... You would have treated me differently, Celestine said, and I did not want to be treated differently. I wanted exactly what you gave me. She squeezed Zuri's hand once and released it. You gave me your own money. You gave me your time. You gave me conversation that had nothing in it about what I owned or what I was worth. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. You gave me the thing that people with money almost never receive, Zuri. You gave me the simple version of yourself. Zuri didn't know what to say to that. She said nothing. Sometimes nothing was the right answer. My son, Celestine said, is going to be difficult. I noticed. He's not a bad man, but he has been powerful for long enough that he has forgotten how to be uncertain. Money does that. She folded her hands on the blanket. Be patient with him. Zuri blinked. We're not. I know what I see, Celestine said, with the serenity of someone who has been seeing things clearly for 75 years. Now go home. Rest. Come back tomorrow. She did not see Dorian again that night, but the next morning he was already outside Maple and Grits when she arrived. A different suit, charcoal with a fine stripe, holding 2 coffees from the place 3 blocks away that charged $8 for a pour-over. He held one out as she approached, like this was a completely normal thing to do at 5:58 a.m. She took it because she needed coffee. This isn't a good start, she said. I need to talk to you. I have a shift. Before your shift. He glanced toward the door. 5 minutes. She looked at the coffee, then at him. She leaned against the exterior wall and waited. He cleared his throat, not nervously. He didn't seem like a man who did things nervously, more like a man who was organizing what he was about to say with the same efficiency he applied to everything. My mother speaks highly of you, he said. She's very kind. She told me what you spent. He met her eyes directly. 26 days, approximately $6 a day, $156 total, roughly. He paused. I would like to reimburse you. That's not necessary. I would also like to offer you a position. Zuri straightened. I have a position. A better one. He held her gaze. My mother is being released tomorrow. She'll need someone nearby during her recovery, someone she trusts and who is not on my payroll and therefore not reporting to me, someone she will actually allow to help her. A beat. The salary would be 3 times what you make here. Benefits. Housing supplement if needed. Zuri stared at him for a long moment. You want to hire me? Yes. To take care of your mother. To be present for her, in whatever capacity she finds useful. She let the silence sit for a moment. And what does your mother think about this plan? Something crossed his face. I haven't told her yet. So this is your idea? Yes. Your idea to solve the problem of your mother needing someone to talk to, Zuri said slowly, by paying a person to be that someone. He heard what she was doing with the sentence. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. I understand how that sounds. Do you? I'm trying to fix something, he said, his voice lower, stripped of its executive register, something real in it, unmanaged. I'm not good at this, but I am trying. She looked at him for a long time. I'll think about it, she said. She pushed off the wall, went inside. She hadn't finished thinking about it when Priscilla Vane walked into the diner at noon. Zuri didn't know who she was at first, just a customer, mid-30s, copper-skinned and immaculately put together in a cream blazer and earrings that were probably real. She sat in Zuri's section, ordered sparkling water and a side salad, spent 10 minutes on her phone, then looked up as if it had just occurred to her. You're the waitress, the one who's been talking to Celestine. Zuri set down the water. Can I help you with something? I'm Priscilla. She said it like the name was its own complete explanation. Dorian's fiancée. Zuri absorbed this. She had not known there was a fiancé. She kept her face neutral. Nice to meet you. Priscilla's smile was warm and technically flawless. I just wanted to come by and say thank you. Personally, what you did for Celestine was so generous. She paused. Dorian mentioned he offered you a job. He did. I hope you'll say no. The directness of it was almost refreshing. Zuri tilted her head. Why? Priscilla folded her hands on the table, elegant, deliberate, a gesture that was almost a parody of Celestine's composure, but colder at the center. Celestine is a complicated woman, she said. She requires a particular kind of management that Dorian and I have spent a long time developing. Bringing in someone new, someone she's formed an attachment to, someone outside our circle, creates instability. She unfolded her hands, picked up the sparkling water. I'm sure you understand. I understand what you're saying, Zuri said. Good. Priscilla smiled again. I don't agree with it, Zuri said pleasantly, and picked up the empty breadbasket from the adjacent table and walked back toward the kitchen, because she had other tables and this conversation was finished. Behind her, she heard Priscilla set down the glass. She didn't look back. That evening, she texted Dorian one word, yes. His reply came 90 seconds later. 3 words. Thank you, Zuri. She stared at her name in his text for a moment, just her name, no punctuation after it, like he had started to write something more and then decided the name alone was enough. Like her name, said plainly, was already saying something. She put her phone face down on the kitchen counter and did not pick it up again for an hour. What the will says. Celestine's house was in Buckhead, which was not a surprise once Zuri saw it, a Georgian colonial behind 2 ancient magnolias, white columns and dark shutters, the kind of house that had simply been there while everything around it reinvented itself decade by decade. Zuri started spending mornings there 6 days after Celestine was discharged. She arrived at 9, stayed until 2 or 3, doing whatever Celestine needed, which turned out to be less about physical care and more about presence. Conversation that moved slowly, with room for silence and no pressure to fill it. They played cards. They argued companionably over the morning news. Celestine taught Zuri her mother's Savannah red rice from memory, narrating each step with the precision of someone who had made it 10,000 times. Zuri told Celestine about growing up in Lagos before her family emigrated to Columbus, Ohio. The city sounds, the market smells, the Nigerian aunties who always knew your business before you did. Your mother, Celestine said one morning during a pause in the card game. Where is she now? Passed, Zuri said. Just the word. She'd learned to say it simply because simple was the only way through it. 4 years ago, heart. Celestine set down her cards. She looked at Zuri with that honey, dark steadiness. I had a daughter, she said. She would have been 31 this March. A pause. She was 6 days old. Zuri held very still. You don't remind me of her, Celestine said carefully. You remind me of what she might have become. That is different. I want you to know I am aware of the difference. I know, Zuri said. It doesn't make it less real, Celestine said. She picked her cards back up. Your turn. Dorian came to the house every evening around 7. Zuri was usually gone by then, but their schedules overlapped twice a week, and on those evenings they orbited each other with the careful precision of two people very aware of exactly where the other one was. He had stopped being combative, not in one clear moment, but in an accumulation of small ones. He refilled her coffee without asking. He read things aloud from his phone and, without deciding to, included her in whatever conversation followed. He caught her eye at something Celestine said, and the look wasn't social maintenance, just one person to another, involuntary. She noticed these things the way she noticed the weather, constantly, without meaning to. One Thursday evening in early December, he was in the kitchen when she stayed late, standing at the counter, eating the leftover red rice she had made with Celestine that morning. He was still in his suit pants and dress shirt, but the jacket was draped over a chair and the collar button was open, and there was something markedly less armored about him in this state. "You made this?" he said. "Your mother made it. I assisted." He ate another forkful. "She used to make this when I was a kid. I haven't had it in—" He stopped, calculated something. "Maybe 15 years. She remembers every single step," Zuri said. "She didn't look at a recipe once." Something moved across his face, the complicated grief of realizing that the person you have been managing from a distance has been storing whole worlds of themselves that you haven't been present for. "She's a remarkable woman," he said. "She is," Zuri agreed. "You should tell her that." He looked at her. "I do. Tell her more." He held her gaze for a beat too long. Then he looked down at the rice. "I know I need to do better," he said quietly. "I know that. The company, the pressure, I know those are not excuses. I know what I let happen." "She doesn't need an apology," Zuri said. "She needs you to stay in the room." He nodded slowly, like the sentence had landed somewhere specific. She picked up her bag. He walked her to the front door. Not formally, not deliberately, just gravitationally, the way you walk toward the thing you don't yet have permission to move toward openly. At the door, she said goodnight and he said goodnight, and she was 2 steps down the brick path when he said her name. "Zuri." She turned. He was standing in the doorway with one hand on the frame, the porch light falling across his face in a way that made him look younger and less certain, and more like someone she might know. "Thank you," he said, "for all of it." She looked at him. "Good night, Dorian." She walked to the bus stop, with her heart doing something she refused to name. The call from Celestine's attorney came on a Tuesday morning in mid-December. Zuri was there when it happened. She heard Celestine's end of the conversation from the sunroom, the precise, composed monosyllables that Celestine used when she was being very careful. When the call ended, Celestine set the phone on the side table and folded her hands and said, without preamble, "I have changed my will." "Celestine." "It is done," Celestine said. "I want you to know because you deserve to know, and because Dorian will find out, and I want the information to come from me." She looked at Zuri steadily. "I have not left you the company. I have left you a portion of the trust, enough to be significant. And I have designated you a member of the family in the formal language of the document." She paused. "Because that is what you are." Zuri felt the room tilt slightly. "You can't—" "I have," Celestine said, "and it is not negotiable, so please do not spend energy trying to negotiate it." A small, precise smile. "What you may spend energy on is sitting back down and finishing this card game, which I was about to win." Priscilla found out in 48 hours. Zuri didn't know how, whether Dorian had told her or whether she had her own channels into the attorney's office. But she found out, and the finding out changed something in her that had already been something Zuri didn't trust. The photos appeared on a Thursday morning, a local Atlanta gossip page, already 400 comments deep when Zuri found it. The images showed Dorian and Zuri outside the Buckhead house, his hand on her arm, their faces close, the porch light doing something cinematic to the angle. She knew exactly what moment it was. She remembered the good night, the gratitude, the 2 steps down the brick path, remembered it precisely because she had been trying hard not to think about it. The anonymous caption implied everything while stating nothing. Dorian Ashwell's new family advisor gets close to the air. By noon, 3 outlets had picked it up. By 2, her phone was ringing from numbers she didn't know. By 3:15, Dorian was standing in the Maple and Grits parking lot. She was on shift because she had not quit the diner, and his face was something she hadn't seen on him before. Not the compressed fury of the alley. Something colder, something that had hardened. "I need to ask you something," he said. She read his face. "You already think you know the answer," she said. "Did you arrange this?" The question arrived like a slap that hadn't used a hand. She stood very still. "No. The photos were taken from the north side of the property. There's no public access point there. The only way someone knew where to be and when was if someone inside the property told them," Zuri said. "Which is exactly right, but that someone was not me. You had access to the house every morning. Dorian," she said his name flat and clean, "look at me." He looked at her. "I fed your mother with my own money for 26 days. I did not know who she was. I did not know who you were. I said yes to this arrangement because she asked me to and because I care about her." Her voice was steady. She made it steady. "Think about what you're accusing me of." Something flickered in his eyes, but the coldness held. "I have to consider every possibility," he said. "My mother just changed her will. There is now a significant financial—" "Stop," she said. He stopped. "I understand what you're doing," she said. "I understand the logic. But understanding the logic doesn't make it hurt less." She picked up her apron from the bench beside her. "I'm going back to work. If you decide you believe me, you know where I am." She went inside. She tied her apron in the back hallway with hands that were steady, made them steady, walked to her section, and served tables for 4 hours without dropping a thing. It was only on the bus home, in the dark, that she pressed her forehead against the cold window and let herself feel the weight of what had just broken. It was her phone buzzing that pulled her back. A text from a number she didn't know containing 2 photos. Photo 1, Priscilla Vane outside a coffee shop talking to a man with a camera bag. Photo 2, a timestamp and a property map with a location pin on the north side of a Buckhead address. The message below the photos said only, "She had someone watching the house for weeks. Si Celestine." Zuri stared at the screen. She had the evidence. She had the proof. She could send it to Dorian right now and watch the whole thing unravel in his hands. She put the phone in her pocket. Then she realized something else was unraveling. Something slower and more private. Something she had been ignoring for 3 weeks by keeping herself busy and professional and exactly where she was supposed to be. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach on the empty bus, in the dark, going home. She had been ignoring something else too. She counted backward, then forward, then backward again. The numbers were the same every time. Ashes and accusations. She was gone by the following Sunday. She didn't make a scene of it. She didn't write a long letter or send a final text or stand outside the Buckhead house waiting for someone to come out and ask her to stay. She packed the one duffel bag she had brought to Atlanta 2 years ago, the same one she'd carried off the Greyhound from Columbus with $40 and a number for a cousin's couch. And she bought a one-way bus ticket to Savannah for $63, and she left. She told Otterline, just Otterline. She called her on a Saturday evening and said she needed to take some time, and asked if her position would be held, and Otterline said, In the particular tone she used when she was not going to ask questions, she understood you couldn't answer yet. "Your section will be here when you're ready. You call me." She told no one else. She found a room in Savannah's East Side neighborhood through a woman named Dorothea, who rented to people she liked the look of, and asked no questions beyond whether you were quiet and whether you cleaned up after yourself. The room had a window that faced a live oak with Spanish moss hanging from it, like the tree had been interrupted mid-sentence for 100 years, and a twin bed with a quilt that smelled like cedar, and a radiator that clicked and hissed through the night like it was trying to tell her something. It cost $420 a month, which she paid in advance with the last of what she had saved. And then she went looking for work. She found it at a place called the Low Country Table, a small restaurant 2 blocks from the waterfront. She crab soup and shrimp and grits, biscuits nearly as good as Dottie's. The owner, a compact Gullah woman named Rosalie Pinkney, hired her on the spot after watching her carry 4 full plates without a tray. "You running from something or toward something?" Rosalie asked. Zuri thought about it honestly. "Both." Rosalie studied her with the unblinking assessment of someone rarely wrong about people. "That's honest," she said. "You're hired." She was 8 weeks along, confirmed on her 3rd day in Savannah at a clinic off Abercorn Street, sitting in a paper gown, processing the information the way she processed things she needed to understand fully before allowing herself to feel them. She felt it on the walk home, in the Spanish moss quiet, in the patience of a city that had seen enough history to absorb whatever you brought to it. She sat in Forsyth Park and watched the fountain and let herself feel the whole enormous reality, what was happening in her body, what it meant, who the other half of it was, and how the anger and the grief and something she hadn't yet named all existed in the same moment, without cancelling each other out. She heard her mother's voice clearly, the way she sometimes did when the choice was obvious and she was the only one standing in her own way. "You already know what to do. You've always known. Stop waiting." She went back to work. She ate a good dinner. She was eating for 2, and Savannah knew how to feed people. She went home and slept. In Atlanta, things were coming apart in a different way. Dorian spent 4 days being certain he was right. He replayed the logic, the timing, the photos, the access, the will, and it held the way logic always holds when you are determined to hold it. He kept the conclusion intact through 3 board meetings and did not think about a woman pressing her hand to the door of a Savannah-bound bus. He hadn't known she was going to Savannah. He found out from Otterline on the 5th day, driving to Maple and Grits, because something underneath the logic kept not holding. Otterline looked at him across the counter with the expression of a woman who had made a decision about him and was deciding whether to share it. She poured him a coffee he hadn't asked for. She set it in front of him and said, "You know what I notice about the people who come in here every day? I'm not here for... They tip the same, regardless of what's going on in their lives," Otterline said. "Bad day, good day, doesn't matter. The ones who see the person bringing the food tip the same. The ones who don't. She wrapped her hands around her own mug. Zuri tipped out of her own pocket to a woman she didn't know. For a month. A pause. That's who she is. That's the whole answer to whatever question you're standing here with. Dorian said nothing. "Savannah," Otterline said. "That's all I'll give you." He went back to the Buckhead house, and he sat in the kitchen where the red rice had been made, where the collar of his shirt had been open, where he had said thank you and meant something larger than the words. And he opened his laptop, and he started going through everything. Every piece of the story, every angle. He found Priscilla's error on the 7th day. It was a small thing, the kind of mistake that careful people make when they believe they have been careful enough and allow themselves one moment of convenience. A text message, recovered by the company's IT security during a routine audit of shared devices. between Priscilla and a number that traced to a freelance photographer with a history of tabloid work. The text was 14 days old. It contained a home address in Buckhead, a description of a specific porch light, and 2 words, Thursday evening. He read it 3 times. He sat with it for a long time. Then he called his attorney. Celestine had known longer. She had suspected from the day the photos appeared, had recognized, in the geometry of the image, the specific angle from the north side of the property that no one accessed accidentally. She had sent Zuri the evidence the same night, from a backup phone Dorian didn't know about, because Celestine Beaumont had not built a fortune, and survived 11 years of widowhood and 1 night of near hypothermia on a diner step by being slow. But she had said nothing to Dorian directly. She had waited because Celestine understood, in the way that mothers of complicated sons understand, that some truths have to be arrived at rather than delivered. A truth handed to Dorian would be processed by his mind, filed, analyzed, managed. A truth he found himself would go somewhere deeper. She was right, as she generally was about these things. What she had not anticipated was the recurrence. On the 9th day after Zuri left Atlanta, Celestine woke at 3 in the morning with a pain in her chest that was specific and unambiguous about its nature. She lay still for a moment and assessed it with the pragmatic calm she applied to most crises, determined it was cardiac and not anxiety, and reached for her phone. She called Dorian first. Then she called 911. Then she folded her hands on top of the quilt with the composure of someone who had made peace with the possibility of difficult mornings and waited for whichever arrived first. Dorian arrived first. By 40 seconds, he sat beside her in the ambulance with her hand in both of his, and he did not say anything useful or instructive or managerial. He just held on. And Celestine, looking at her son's face in the lurching blue-red light of the ambulance interior, thought, there he is, there's the boy. She had been waiting 11 years for him to stop being the executive and be the boy again, just for a moment, just long enough for her to see him. I know about Priscilla, he said. His voice was rough. I know you know, she said. I'm sorry for what I said to Zuri. Don't tell me, Celestine said. Her grip tightened on his hand. Go tell her. Priscilla, when confronted, did not crumble. She pivoted, reached quickly for the next argument, the next version of events. She was very good at it. But Dorian had the text message, the photographer's records, the photo metadata, precise location, precise time, and an attorney who had seen enough of this kind of evidence to know exactly what it meant. Priscilla left on a Thursday, smoothly, as if departing on her own terms was still, technically, a kind of winning. Dorian stood at the window and watched the car go. He didn't feel relief. He felt something simpler and heavier, the weight of a man seeing himself clearly for the first time in a long time, and not entirely liking what he sees. He picked up his phone. He looked at Zuri's contact. Last message sent 17 days ago. 3 words. Thank you, Zuri. He put the phone down. He drove to the diner instead. Otterline looked at him when he walked in. She looked at his face, and whatever she saw there made her nod slowly, once, the nod of a woman whose assessment of a person was in the process of being revised upward. Table for 1? She said. Just the address, he said. Please. Otterline considered him for 3 full seconds. Then she went to the back and came out with a piece of paper and set it on the counter in front of him without a word. He picked it up. He went back to his car. He sat for a moment with the piece of paper in his hand and the engine not yet running, and the December light falling through the windshield at the particular angle of an Atlanta afternoon that is trying, imperfectly, to be warm. He thought about a woman sitting on a cold concrete step with her hands folded in her lap and a voice that placed every word precisely, like good china. He thought about 26 days of eggs and biscuits and $6 a day, paid quietly, told to no one. He thought about a good night on a brick porch, and the 2 steps down, and the name said into the cold air behind her, and the thing he had not yet named for himself, clearly enough to say it. He started the engine. He drove south. Home is where you return. Zuri was on the lunch shift when he walked in. She was carrying a bowl of she-crab soup to table 4, and she didn't see him right away. She was watching the soup. Because Rosalie did not permit spillage on the grounds that she-crab soup at the Low Country table was a sacred thing and should be transported accordingly. And she set the bowl down and straightened and turned toward the door, and there he was. He was standing just inside the entrance in his drive coat, hair slightly less composed than she had ever seen it. A man who had been in a car for 4 hours and had not thought once about what he was going to say when he arrived. A man who had, for once, done something before he finished planning it. He saw her the same moment she saw him. The restaurant had 7 tables, 6 occupied, the lunch bustle going on around them, indifferent, the way the world always goes on indifferent to the things that matter most inside it. Zuri walked to the host stand. "You drove," she said. "Yes." 4 hours. 3:57, he said. "I took 16 most of the way, less traffic." She looked at him. The silence between them had weight, not the weight of emptiness, but of everything that had been accumulating since an October morning on a cold back step, building through hospital waiting rooms and parking lot confrontations and bus rides home in the dark, until it was too heavy to carry separately and had to be set down somewhere together. "I found the text messages," he said, "between Priscilla and the photographer, dated 2 weeks before the photos appeared." A pause. It was her. "All of it. I know," Zuri said. "Your mother sent me the evidence the night it happened." Something moved through him. "She didn't tell me she'd done that." "She was waiting for you to find it yourself," Zuri said. "She said a truth handed to you would be managed. A truth you found would go somewhere deeper." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had the quality of something that had been held under pressure for a long time and had finally been allowed to surface. "She's right," he said. "She's almost always right. I've spent a long time making myself too busy to notice that." "I know," Zuri said again, more gently. "I said things to you in that parking lot you did that I cannot take back." "No," she agreed. "You can't." He held her gaze. "I'm not here to take them back. I'm here because—" He stopped. She watched him search for the sentence. This man who was precise about everything and was not, right now, being precise at all. And she understood that this imprecision was the most important thing he had offered her since they met. "I'm here because the thing I said to you in that parking lot was wrong. And because I drove 4 hours before I finished deciding to, and I'd like to. I need to." He exhaled. "Tell me what I need to do. Dorian, tell me." She looked at him. Around them, the Low Country table went on, being a restaurant, soup moving, plates arriving, a child at table 2 demanding a second biscuit. The ordinary world indifferent, as always, to 2 people standing at a host stand with everything between them. "There's something I have to tell you first," she said. His expression shifted, a careful alertness, the kind that precedes news you can feel coming before it arrives. She held his gaze, and she told him, simply, directly. The way her mother had taught her to deliver truth, not softened into ambiguity, not dressed up in preamble, but placed clearly and given room to land. He said nothing for a moment. Then he sat down on the bench by the host stand, not because he was asked to, but because his body decided before he did. He sat with his hands pressed flat against his thighs, the way she had seen him do once before, in the Escalade, holding himself together from the outside. 5 full seconds of middle distance. Then he looked up. "Okay," he said. She blinked. "Okay? I mean, not okay as in small and uncomplicated. Okay as in I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this requires, I'm here for it." He stood. He met her eyes without armor, without management, just the actual him showing up. "If you'll let me." She studied his face, the tells she had learned, the fractures, the moments when the executive fell away. She looked at him now with all of it, and what she saw was not performance, not strategy, just a man telling the truth, asking for something he didn't know how to ask for gracefully. "You should know," she said quietly, "that I am not easy. I grew up with $40 and a duffel bag, and I have never once needed rescuing. I'm not going to start now." "I know," he said, "and I'm not leaving Savannah yet. I like it here. Rosalie needs me through January." "Okay, and you're going to apologize to me properly, not right now, but before the end of the week. With words, Dorian, full sentences." Something that was almost a smile moved across his face. The first real one she had ever seen on him, uncontrolled, slightly crooked, entirely unmanaged. It rearranged his face into something softer and more uncertain and infinitely more interesting than everything that had come before it. "Full sentences," he said. "Full sentences." He reached out then, not for her hand, not dramatically, just the side of his hand against the side of hers. The quietest possible form of contact, barely a touch, like asking a question so carefully that the question itself was the answer. She didn't move her hand away. The apology came on a Wednesday evening in Forsyth Park. He sat beside her on the bench where she had counted backward in the dark, and he apologized, fully, in complete sentences, without self-justification. He said what he had done, and what it had cost her, and that he was sorry. And then he stopped talking, and let the sorry sit between them like something real. She listened to all of it. Then, "I accept that." He exhaled, long, slow, releasing something held too tight. She put her hand in his. They sat until the Savannah evening settled around them, soft and warm for January, fountain running, live oaks dark against the sky, the city waiting with the patience of a place that has seen everything and is ready, always, to see what comes next. The baby came on a Wednesday in late July. A girl, 7 pounds 4 ounces, with Dorian's cedar complexion and Zuri's wide, dark eyes, and a voice that announced itself to the delivery room at Savannah's Memorial Health with a force entirely disproportionate to her size. Celestine was there. She had driven down from Atlanta 2 days before the due date, and waited with the composure of a woman who has been waiting a long time for something good, and knows patience is simply the price of it. When the nurse placed the baby in her arms, Celestine was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the child's face with the complete attention she gave to everything that mattered. "Well," she said, her voice steady and only slightly undone. "Hello?" The baby looked directly back at her, with the authority of someone who had arrived from a great distance and intended to be known. Zuri, watching from the bed with Dorian's hand in both of hers, felt the whole improbable chain of it. One October morning, one cold step, $6. Leading through hospital corridors and parking lots and 4-hour drives and a January Park bench to this room, this light, this family assembled from smaller choices made correctly. "Her name," Dorian said, low, beside her ear. "Adeze," Zuri said. "For my mother." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Adeze Celestine." She turned to look at him. He was not performing composure. He was not managing anything. He was just a man at the edge of something enormous, holding her hands, with his mother across the room holding their daughter, and his eyes doing the thing that eyes do when the feeling is too large for the face to contain it all. "Yes," Zuri said. "Adeze Celestine." 1 year later, Maple and Grit's diner looked the same from the outside. Same brick front, same hand-painted sign, same small concrete step, where the memory of a woman in a brown dress with folded hands lived in the air like something permanent. Inside, the ownership papers filed with Fulton County listed 2 names now, Otterline Marsh and Zuri Ashwell. Behind the counter, a framed photo. A woman in a black waitress uniform, a tall man in charcoal, an elderly woman with honey-dark eyes, and a baby held toward the camera like an offering. And every Tuesday morning, the service entrance step held a thermos of coffee and a brown paper bag, eggs, a biscuit, something warm, left before the diner opened, for whoever needed it. Zuri had started the first week back. She told no one. She just did it, quietly, consistently, the way her mother would have done it, with money she could barely afford, and the conviction that the gesture was worth more than the calculation. Otterline had seen her do it exactly once, on a cold January morning when they were both in early and the alley was still dark. She hadn't said anything. She just poured 2 coffees and handed one to Zuri, and they'd stood there for a moment in the half-dark before the morning began, the way you stand with someone you trust completely, in the comfortable, sufficient silence of people who understand each other. Then Otterline said, "Your section's going to fill fast today, Super Bowl Sunday." "I know," Zuri said. They went inside. "End,"